With any discussion on art, there's always the inevitable argument on just what is the most important aspect when it comes to an artistic medium. For music, people will say the audio. For painting, people will say the visuals. For a book, people will say the story. For a movie, people will say one of all of the above. There's quite a few things that one might say about a video game, with perhaps the most obvious being the controls, in that video games rely on a more direct input system compared to most other artistic mediums, especially the more commercial ones. This is typically in the form of a controller with buttons, analog sticks, shoulder buttons, and a D-pad nowadays for most games out there. Meanwhile, a lot of other art forms rely on a more passive form of interaction, from sifting through a book to just sitting there and watching your favorite animated movie. Mind you, all art to an extent has a form of interaction, in that we, the audience, are processing the events that are happening right in front of us. How else are books, for example, able to have such powerful imagery, despite the fact that most don't even contain a single image? I mean, outside of the cover art, but still. Art wouldn't have anything, or be anything, if not for an audience. With that established, what would you say is the most important aspect of a video game? The most important ingredient, rather. There are many to choose from, as you can see from the visual here, but one man from YouTube picks an ingredient that I find to be one of the more compelling arguments, as being the most important ingredient in a video game.
Is challenge, difficulty.
That most important ingredient being not from its controls, but rather the difficulty. I would say that's a good suggestion, as a challenging video game can mean the difference between engagement and a boring chore. With any piece of art, it needs engagement. If it isn't holding your attention, then there's just something that isn't doing for you. As noted, if you happen to be in a I'd rather be anywhere else but here mood. But yeah, in the case of a video game, it can become rather boring if its actions on screen fail to engage the player. Typically, the ideal video game challenge is being challenging, but at the same time being fair, or at least feeling fair to the audience. Note that I said fair, as said challenge should feel like it is the player's fault for failing said challenge, and not the game being cheap in some way, such as a cheap surprise from off-screen, for example, or if the controls feel like they are working against you. However, maybe it isn't always about a game being super challenging. Maybe the player prefers the atmosphere that is generated by said game with its visuals and music. Yeah, perhaps it is that sheer personality that it does for the player. In essence, all guesses are valid in their own right. What matters the most to someone is what interests them the most in a piece of art, with different ingredients having different priorities. Such as the case in any recipe in cooking, there are many ingredients at play here. And what's more, any art is the same way in which certain pieces are assembled to achieve a certain result. Let's see what you come up with. Good luck!